Okay, digital imaging. So this is going to be our first practice tutorial that we start using with Illustrator here. So remember that Illustrator is a vector-based program, and so what that means is that anything that you draw inside Illustrator, you can make it bigger or smaller, and it's not going to lose any of its quality here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start off by making some shapes here, just learning some basic tools inside Illustrator. So on the left-hand side, we've got our toolbar over here where we have different tools. A lot of these tools have different functions here, so if you look at this little arrow that's in the bottom right hand side of each one, if you hold your mouse button down, you'll see that there's different functions for each one. We're not going to worry about all of these tools today. Today we're just doing some really basic stuff. But we've got our toolbar over here on the left hand side. Down here at the bottom we've got our fill, which is this square right here. And then we have our stroke, which is the square here. Our fill is going to be the color that the shape fills in, and then our stroke is going to be the color that goes around the outside of that shape. And you can change those colors, and we'll do that here in a little bit. Up here at the top, we've got our menu bar, and the menu bar changes depending on which tool that you select and use. And then over here at the right-hand side, we have our Windows panel. Anytime you need to get any of your windows back, remember you can always go up to Window at the top of Illustrator, and then they're in alphabetical order here. So for example, if you ever lose your Layers panel or any other type of panel, you can get that here. You want to make sure that you're working on our work area layer here, and then this worksheet layer, which is this one, is locked. So there's this little padlock icon here. You want to make sure that this is locked here and that this is visible, which is what that icon is, so that you don't accidentally select any of these shapes and kind of move them around and stuff like that. So you've got this layer here. There's nothing on there right now because we haven't made anything, and we'll talk more about layers later on. It'll make a lot more sense later on. I'm going to zoom in by pressing my Control plus key. Control plus zooms in, Control minus zooms out. If you are using a mouse, you can also zoom in by using the Alt key and scrolling in and out. Okay, so the first tool that I'm going to grab here is I'm going to grab my shape tool, and inside the shape tool there's multiple tools inside here. The first one that I'm going to be using is my rectangle tool. So to use this tool, if you click and drag, you can create a rectangle. So depending on which direction and how far I pull, I can make a rectangle here. If I hold my shift key though, I can make a square here. Okay, so the first shape I'm going to make is I'm going to make this rectangle here. So I'm going to start off in the corner. I'm going to click and drag and pull out like that. I'm going to select I'm going to change the color of this so you can see it a little bit easier. So I'm going to grab my selection tool. There's the selection tool and the direct selection tool. We'll talk about the differences later on, more in depth here, but the selection tool, you can move stuff around, make it bigger or smaller, rotate it. The direct selection tool, you can select anchor points. So I'm going to grab my color picker. I'm going to double click onto my fill color here, and I'm going to get this dialog box that opens up here. I've got this box here, which is going to be tints and shades, so I can select a color and make it lighter with more white in it, so I can give it like more pink here, or I can make it darker with more black in it and make it more dark here. You can pick whatever color you want. I like blue, so I'm going to go with blue here. Okay, and then I'm also going to change the stroke of my shape here. So I'm selecting my stroke here. I'm going to double click again, and then I'm going to go with like an orange here. You can do whatever color you want. Okay, you'll see here is the new color that I have, and then underneath here is the old color here. Okay, I can also change the thickness of my stroke on my shape here. You can see that getting bigger. I'm just going to bring that up a little bit here. Okay, so that's my first shape here. And then now next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my square tool, and I'm going to go in the corner here. I'm going to hold shift and do the same thing. I'm going to create a perfect square like that. Alright, now what I want to do is I want to make this diamond shape. So if I go to my shape tool, you'll see that I don't have a diamond shape. So what I can do is I can grab this square here, and I can make a copy of it. I can make a copy two different ways. One way is I can go up to edit and copy, the same thing as doing Control C and Control V as in Victor to paste. It's the same thing as going up to edit and paste. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to do Control C and then Control V and paste that. I'm going to put this over here. Now what I need to do is rotate this. So I have my selection tool. I've got my shape selected. I can tell I've got it selected because I have this dialog box around the outside. Now what I want to do is I want to rotate this. So if I go out to the edge here, you'll see I get this double curved arrow here. That means I can rotate this. If I go out to this corner, you'll see I have a straight arrow here, double-sided arrow. That means I can make this bigger or smaller. I'm not going to make this bigger or smaller. I'm going to step backwards. So I'm going to press Control Z. And then I'm going to go here and I'm going to rotate this. I can rotate this by rotating it like this, where I'm rotating it 360 degrees. I can also hold my Shift key, and it'll rotate this 15 degrees here. So that's what I'm going to do. I have my Shift key held down. I'm going to let go, and then I'm going to rotate that. This is a little bit bigger than what I want, so I'm going to shrink this down a little bit. So I'm holding my Shift key, and I'm shrinking this box down a little bit here. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same thing, and again I'm not going to be able to make this triangle shape, so we're going to do something different here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this again, although I'm going to do a little bit different. Instead of doing Control C and pasting, I'm going to hold my Option key, and you'll see when I hold my Option key down, I get this double-sided arrow here. So I'm going to click and drag, and that's another way to make a copy of this. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to turn this square into this diamond into like a triangle shape here. So I'm going to grab my direct selection tool. The direct selection tool, you can select different anchor points. So this square is made up of different anchor points. This one here, these 4 anchor points, and these paths. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this anchor point. So I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to select that here. And then I'm going to press delete, and that's going to delete that anchor point, and now I'm left with these 3 anchor points here. To kind of show you a little bit better what's going on here. So this is what I've got. I've got these 2 lines here with these 3 anchor points. What I want to do though is I want to close in that shape. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my direct selection tool. So you can probably see the difference now. The direct selection tool, you can select different shapes, and you can select different anchor points on your shapes here, and then the selection tool, you can move, rotate, and make stuff bigger or smaller here. So I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to select these 2 anchor points right here and here. And then I'm going to go up to Object, Path, and Join. Okay, you'll see there's a quick key for that, Control J. We can use that later on here, and that's going to join that path. Now I'm going to just fill this in here. I'm going to do kind of like a red here. I kind of like that magenta. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same thing here with this ellipse tool. So I'm going to go back to my shape tool, and I'm going to grab my ellipse tool, and I can click and drag. Now I can make an ellipse here depending on which direction I pull, but what I want to do is I want to make a perfect circle. So I'm going to hold my Shift key down. I'm going to try to get that kind of as close as I can to the right shape. Okay. Same thing, I can do Control C and copy. I'm just going to hold Alt or Option down and pull that over like that. Okay, it's a little bit big, so I'm going to shrink this down just a little bit. And then same thing, I'm going to grab my direct selection tool. I could click and drag and select my anchor point. The other way I can also do this is if I click once on that anchor point, you'll see that it's a solid red. These have a little white on the inside. It's a little hard to tell. But then if I press delete, I can delete that anchor point. Same thing, this path is opened up, so I want to close that path. So I'm going to click and drag and select both of those anchor points. The other way I could do this is I could click on the anchor point, hold my Shift key down, and click on this other anchor point. I usually don't do that. It's just a little bit quicker. I'm going to press Control J to join here. Okay, so you can see that path is filled in. Next thing I want to do, I'll make another copy. Now I'm going to rotate this, so I'm going to rotate it this way. I'm going to hold my Shift key down and rotate that. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is make another copy here. Now we're going to do something a little bit different here. So I've got this shape here. I need to kind of stretch this. So we're going to use a new tool. So we're going to grab our transform tool. So that's going to be this tool here. On default, you might have this little puppet warp tool selected. It looks like this little thumbtack. I'm going to grab my free transform tool, so I'm holding my mouse button down, and then I should get this box that opens up here. There's 3 options. There's the free transform, the perspective, and the free distort. I'm going to grab the perspective tool. I've got my shape selected. I can distort this shape with these 4 these little circles here. So I can grab this one here like that. I can grab this one here like that. I can kind of squish this in a little bit and get that to that right shape here. Okay. All right, next tool we're going to grab our star tool. So I'm going to go down here to my star tool, and on default, this has some of my old settings here. So I want to make a 5-pointed star here. So that's this star here. So I can do this a couple different ways. The easiest way is if I click once with the star tool, I'll get this menu bar that opens up. I need to make 5 points, so I'm going to do 5 points here. On default, it usually makes a 5-pointed star. And then here I have 2 different radiuses. Radius 1 is going to be this outer radius of my points, and then radius 2 is going to be the inner radius of these points. So the greater distance between these two, the greater the distance between your points on there. I hope that makes sense. Okay, well, that actually worked out pretty well. Okay, just to kind of make things different, I'm going to do kind of some different colors for each one of these rows. But I hate that color combination. All right, so we're going to grab our star tool again, and see, again, you know, because I don't have a tool that makes all these ones, so I'm going to do the same one, and I think this is 14. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, 12. So I can click once. I'm going to make a 12-pointed star, and let's see what like 14 and 11 looks like here. So it looks pretty good. That's actually more for this guy. Oh, I actually did that really well. I'm going to do this again, and I'm going to make this a lot more pronounced. So I'm going to do, let's do 9. Let's see what that looks like. Okay. And then we're doing the same thing as we did before. So I'm going to hold the Option key, make a copy of this, and I'm going to grab my, instead of using my perspective tool, I'm going to grab the transform tool. I'm going to use the free distort here, and that's going to give me a little bit more. I'm actually going to grab, I'm going to grab my free transform tool. So I'm going to kind of pull this. Kind of get that to what I want to do. I also need a little bit more control, so what I'm actually going to grab my direct selection tool. So I'm going to grab my direct selection tool. So a little bit like the transform tool, with the direct selection tool you can select anchor points. So if I click once on the anchor point, I'm telling Illustrator this is the anchor point I want to control, and then I can click again and hold my mouse button down and control those anchor points. So I'm clicking once on the anchor point, and then holding my mouse button down and controlling that. So I'm just kind of pulling these in here. Sometimes you got to do it a couple times because Illustrator isn't really listening. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, and now I'm going to grab my polygon tool. I'm making a 6-sided polygon. A 3-sided one. You'll notice that I'm switching back and forth between some of these different tools. 5. Going back between the selection tool and the move tool. What is that, 8? Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whoops, 10. Okay, now I can use my rounded rectangle tool, which is going to be this tool here. There's also another way that we can make this. We'll talk about that later on here. So I'm going to expand that out. You'll also notice with these shapes here, there are these little dots in the corners here. Those are also, you can control the roundness of your shape here. Let's do kind of a yellow. Let's see what this looks like here. Okay. And I'm kind of going out to the edge here, and then I can grab kind of round that out like that. Okay, so those are my shapes. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use a few different options here. We're going to use our Pathfinder tool and some other new tools here. So for this first section, what we're going to do is we're going to make some copies and bring these over here. So I'm going to grab this shape, hold my Option key, bring them over here, grab this shape, Option key holding down, grab this shape, and pull this over here like that. I'm going to change the color of this guy. Okay, you'll notice that when I bring these shapes over here, that was the bell by the way, when I bring these shapes over here, that the Illustrator will stack these. So I've got this shape behind this shape, I've got this shape underneath everything, this circle on top of everything. If I want to change the arrangement of those, I can do a right click and go to arrange here, and I can do bring to front, bring forward. So bring to front is going to bring it all the way to the front, bring forward, it's going to bring it up one level, send backward, and send it back. So as you make shapes inside Illustrator, it will automatically put them in the order that you made them. So I'm going to do bring to front here. That's going to bring this shape all the way to the front like that. Okay, I could send this shape all the way to the back. Okay. Now what I'm going to do, so all these shapes are separated. There's going to be some times where you make shapes and you want them all to kind of stick together. So what we're going to do is we're going to group these. So I'm going to go up to Object and go to Group up here. And if I select this, I can select these shapes individually. If I select this, now these shapes are all kind of glued together. Now if you ever want to kind of unglue them, what you can do is go back up to Object and then go to Ungroup and do that. Okay. If these are all still grouped, and I have these all selected when I group them, and then go to Group here. If I want to select them individually, I always can. If I grab my Direct Selection tool, I can select this, and if I want to kind of bump this over, you know, that's something that I can do. Okay. All right, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be using my Pathfinder tool. And the Pathfinder tool is going to be over here on the right hand side of my panels tool, and that's going to be this one here with these two little squares overlapping. And what I want to do is I want to make these all one single shape. So I've got them selected. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I'm going to copy this guy, put him back over here. Okay. And I'm going to grab my shape builder tool, and there's multiple different options here. If you hold your mouse over it, it will kind of tell you which one you want to do. So I want to do the compound shape, so I'm going to use Unite. So I'm going to click on this, and what that's going to do is you'll notice that when I click on that, it makes all those shapes one single piece. Now when you do this, you're not going to be able to separate out those shapes anymore. So now it's all one single piece. Let me get rid of my fill so you can kind of see what's happening. Now they're all one single piece and I can't separate them. So I've got this stroke that goes all the way around, and then I've got the fill on here. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this, and I'm going to create a gradient. So the gradient is in two spots here. There's the gradient tool, which is over here on the left hand side. So if I click on this, I can create a default gradient. Depending on which direction I pull and how far I pull, it's going to make this gradient. You can see it's inside my fill box here. On default, it's going to be a black and white gradient. I can control this slider and change, where the black and the white kind of merge. The other way I can do this is I can grab my gradient panel here over here on the left hand side. I'm going to detach this and pull this off of my window bar. Same options here. I can click and drag and kind of adjust this. Up inside here you have a few different options. There's the linear gradient and the radial gradient. There's also freeform gradient, and we'll talk about that later on. So the linear gradient, it goes like in a line here, either vertically, diagonally, or horizontally. Then radial, my gradient expands out from the center. So depending on where the center of that is and how far I pull will change that gradient. The other thing I can also do is I can also add colors. So I'm going to grab my swatches up here at the top. I'm just going to click and drag and pull some default swatches into my gradient. Okay. And then I'm going to grab this blue here. I can pull those in here. I can kind of move those colors around. If I want to get rid of some colors, I can just click on the color and just pull down and let go, and I'll drag that off. This is a gradient, so you have to have at least 2 colors in there to make a gradient here. And I actually don't like that blue. I'm going to get rid of that. And then let's just do kind of this deep red. Okay. I could change this to a radial if I want, but I'm actually just going to leave it with this linear one. Okay. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this again. I'm going to make another copy. The other tool that we can use, which is kind of the same thing, is I can use my shape builder tool. So if I've got this selected, I can grab my shape builder tool, which is going to be this one over here. I've got my shape selected. Now you'll see these grayed out parts to my toolbox here, and if I click and drag, I can combine these different shapes. I can also delete some of those. If I hold my option key, I can delete some of those shapes. So maybe I want to delete some of these guys. I'm going to step backwards because that's not what I want to do. But I can combine these different shapes by clicking and dragging and using my shape builder tool, which is pretty cool. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some of these other shapes here, and which ones do we have? We have like a star, a circle, and this polygon here. So I've got these all selected here. I'm going to click and drag and make a copy, and then I'm going to shrink these guys down. I'm going to right click and go to Arrange and bring to front, and that's going to put these on top. I'm going to make these guys a little bit smaller. I'm holding Shift, by the way, to select all these shapes. Okay, so another way that I can do this is I can select these. I can go back to my Pathfinder tool, and I'm going to use my exclude option here. So I'm going to click like that, and that's going to cut out that shape. I don't know why that. Oh, let's do minus front. Yeah, there we go. So that'll cut that shape out, and then I'm going to do the same thing again. It's going to cut that shape out, and then I need to send this to the back. Something happened to my other shape. Okay, and you can see that that's cutting those shapes out. It's kind of like a cookie cutter, and it cuts those out. Okay, and I can do the same thing here. I'm going to shrink these down again, and then bring to front. Put this on top. Okay, I can select all these. I can go back to my shape builder tool, and if I hold my Alt key, you'll see that it'll see that little minus sign. I can cut those out. Okay. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make this into my gradient into a stroke. So I'm going to swap these two.
Good morning, Centerville Mustangs. Today is August 25th, Wednesday.
And I'm going to get rid of this fill here. And then the last thing I'm going to do is grab my strokes, and I'm going to apply a dash line here to this. Okay. Alright guys,